I mean, think about that. And so what are the elected officials depending upon other than campaign contributions to make a decision? They're depending upon professionals. And the planners, there has to be a system whereby the recommendation of the planning profession really means something.
That's a good comment.
And I agree with Frank, but I think one of the things, Frank, I mean, when you say that the system is not a bad system, but, you know, Dean made very sure the comprehensive plan drives everything. Are those actually good plans? I mean, look at the comprehensive plans and look what they really say. Most comprehensive plans really don't give you a vision of what this community should be all about. So I think the first thing that you would have to do, if you want to say that the system works, but it's the implementation, then let's start actually writing comprehensive plans that have a vision, that mean something, that I can read the comprehensive plan and I can think, wow, this is what this community wants to be about. Instead of just reading these policies, goals, and objectives that you can interpret in any kind of way.
Yeah, if you think about it, we have a state plan, we have regional policy plans which are supposed to be consistent with the state plan. We have county plans which are supposed to be consistent with the regional strategic policy plans and the state plan. We have local plans. We have a local planning agency that's supposed to ensure, on paper, the process works, but nobody wants those goals, objectives, and policies to be anything but puffery. And if they really were what 9J5 meant them to be, and what actually came out of the 72 legislation and the 85 Act, you'd actually be talking about substance. Right. But no one wants substance because they all want discretion.
Can't argue with that. There any other questions?
Well, I think, you know, I think that the problem's been identified somewhat, but I think we're missing a big piece of the problem. I think a big problem is that the public has no patience. And also, as Dr. Chapin, I think, noted, there's so many transients in the state, and that makes it even worse. There's a lot more impatience in the public, so that we're really, as planners, we're fundamentally different than the majority of the population, because we're looking at the long-term issues. We're trying to look towards the future, and which means, by definition, we have a lot more patience. So we're a lot different than a lot of the general public. And you just take a look at the outcome of the elections. I mean, just change, change, change. We don't care, what the change is. We just want to see something different, without trying to follow any plans. And the last speaker, I think, hit a very important part, that we have great process, we have great enabling legislation, and in some cases we have some good plans, but who actually makes the decisions? Why are we having these quasi-judicial hearings about determinations on planning issues by an elected body that right away waives quasi-judicial proceedings so they can just make their decisions and decide how they want? Why don't we turn these over just as the courts do? Why don't we have an appointed body to make these type of decisions of planners, the ones that understand this process, and and allow them to actually make these type of land use and policy decisions on the future that clearly drives the economy in the long term. Land use clearly is the important factor. If we had made better land use decisions now, 20 years ago, we would be in a far better position than we are right now.
Anybody want to take a shot at that one? It's a good question.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Well, let the planners make decisions. That's in the ideal world, that planners have a professional training and look at the community in the long run. Those people should make decisions. But in reality, that's not the case. And I don't know how to fix that problem.
Well, of course, the planning panel would tell you that.
Right. I was going to say, one of the awful attributes of being a professor is that my job is to sort of identify problems, right? And sort of my response is, gosh, that's great, except the statute, I think, says that the elected officials, or somebody who's elected, has to make these decisions. So we run into that little problem of the way the rules currently read is, we don't elect planners. They're staff, and staff are advisory to people we elect, and therefore, if we don't like their decisions, we can elect new people. So that's having said that, your sentiment is I agree with you. I too often see where planning staff will come in and argue very, very logically and very coherently and very rationally and very well, don't approve this, and then what happens? They vote and it gets approved, right? And Secretary Powell, I remember talking about this a few years ago at an event in this exact room where he said what we need to do is make elected officials accountable for these decisions, and we need to have, getting back to this theme of performance measures for elected officials and how often they overturn planning staff recommendations, either for or against. Again, something like that makes a lot of sense to me. So the idea, I think, is very sound. It's implementation. How do we make it happen?
We probably have time for one more question.
In the Florida
And a quick
statutes,
comment.
for example, in 163-300 is the example of the legislative delegation of that decision-making authority with community redevelopment agencies. The elected body has the ability to designate to an appointed body the decision-making as it relates to redevelopment, and the tax increment funds that flow to the redevelopment agency trust fund are a source of money separate and apart from the elected officials' process, and the only role that the elected officials have in redevelopment, if they delegate that authority, is approving the community redevelopment agency plan and budget. So there is actually a model of that delegation type of implementation.
Okay, there was one other question here in the front.
The interesting thing that I heard from Dr. Zhang was how Oregon is doing so well. That's like one of the big models of, improvement. And you said how the planners are allowed to go into the community and speak to the community, at leisure about what they want, for the future. And the question that I wanted to ask is, why do they have that leisure and that authority, the planners in Oregon? It could be because of the elected officials are backed off now because they were in such a bad state at one time. But I think it was interesting that the planners have so much power there.
Well, it's not a leisure. It's a group exercise that says authorized by the city council that we needed to come together with the community, come together with some plans for the future. So the individual planners are assigned to go to different communities to have a visionary discussion about the future of Oregon. So that was they authorized to do it. It's not like they're going there. Yeah.
But how do they get a government that was so progressive? Why are they better than everyone else?
By accident, in part.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got this thing out there in Portland called Metro that was created back in the late 1970s as an urban service delivery entity, and it evolved to be the regional planning entity for out there.
It also takes some strong leaderships. There are a few governors. They are in the 50s that they are very pro environment protections, and they wanted to protect the environment. Oregon that unique to have protect the farmland, and so they created several organizations at the state level specifically for that purpose.
Okay. We're pretty much out of time, and the lunch is getting prepared back there. And Neil, do you want to make a comment here? Or?
Not at all.
Okay.
I want to thank the panelists, Dr. Vos, Dr. Peng, Dr. Chapin. I want to thank Joe Egelhart for moderating the discussion. And I thought we could go on, but we have to follow a schedule, and we have lunch in the back of the room. We have a half-hour break.